down on 2 large-scale searches for little Gus Lamont, now missing for exactly a month. Volunteers have covered a 6-kilometre radius from the homestead near Yunta where he was last seen, but according to some experts, he could have got access some sort of moisture or dew or moist leaves, then that could increase it somewhat.
Welcome back to the case of Gus Lamont. It's been over a month since the 4-year-old vanished from that remote outback station in South Australia. No new searches are planned, leaving Task Force Horizon to sift through tips with 0 fresh leads. Even more shocking is that experts now say Gus could have wandered way farther than the 6-kilometre radius they covered, pushing into uncharted territory and ramping up the urgency for his safety. Yet, some assessments suggest he might still be alive out there. So, what if the search missed him entirely? What do you think happened? Wandering gone wrong, or something more sinister? Stick around as we dig deeper. Is Gus still alive? As of October 28, 2025, with no new searches planned, and there is a shocking realization sinking in that Gus could have wandered far beyond the 6-kilometre radius everyone first expected. The most critical question remains whether a 4-year-old could still be alive out there in the unforgiving outback. The urgent search for Gus wrapped up on October 16, 2025, after 10 straight days of grinding through the outback, shifting straight into a recovery operation because the medical experts flat out said there was little hope left after that long without a single trace. They combed 470 square kilometers with 80 Australian Defence Force soldiers, infrared drones, and sniffer dogs, yet turned up nothing. No Minions shirt, no wide-brimmed hat, no little boots. Task Force Horizon is still sifting through more than 150 Crime Stoppers tips, but 0 fresh evidence has surfaced. The police have exhausted every possibility and are now prepping the family for the worst, hammering home how lethal the outback is at 35 degrees Celsius, with nothing but dust and no water in sight. The helplessness is glaring. No new searches are scheduled. Just the final review of hours of drone footage, and the danger to Gus's safety has skyrocketed after more than 30 days of exposure, where dehydration or death is almost certain if he's out there wandering. From the moment he vanished at 5 p.m. on September 27 until now, the operation has scaled back based on survival estimates that a 4-year-old can't last more than 3 days at the baseline, and while it could pivot to something resembling a more serious case probe if needed, it remains classified as missing persons. The official CEPOL assumption is that Gus simply wandered off from the sand pile outside the homestead at 5 p.m., with no third-party involvement, leaning on the fact that the property sits 43 kilometers down a rough track from the barrier highway, making any random abduction improbable. The initial search radius was pegged at 6 kilometers around Oak Park Station, 40 kilometers south of Yunta. Yet he could have gone much farther than anyone first thought. Experts from Flinders University pointed out on October 27 that, in the first 3 days, without fear holding him back, Gus might have covered 3 to 8 kilometers, pushing well past the searched zone thanks to the flat scrub bush and a prevailing southwesterly wind that could nudge a small child along. The risk in that range is huge.
But according to some experts, he could have got much further. Over a 3-day period, potentially somewhere between 3 to 8.
If he's wandering, he could easily veer into dry creek beds or thick scrub, stretching the distance without leaving confirmed footprints. The only one found, 500 meters away, was ruled out, and while infrared drones scanned at night, the scorching daytime sand makes heat signatures nearly impossible to pick up, underscoring how the sheer vastness of the outback causes planners to underestimate the possible ground he covered. The search timeline shows the early focus from September 28 to October 7 locked on that 6-kilometer circle. October 13 to 14 expanded to a 5.5-kilometer radius with ADF support. By October 16 it was over, though experts like former homicide detective Gary Jubilin have raised the possibility that wildlife could drag remains even farther, still within the wandering framework. Flinders University experts laid it out on October 27. Gus could theoretically still be alive if he managed to reach moisture from dew or damp leaves in the grass and scrub, stretching survival beyond the standard 3 days without water, food, or shelter.
If the child would be able to access some sort of moisture or dew or moist leaves, then that could increase it somewhat.
The fear factor might make him freeze close to the homestead, limiting movement, but boosting his odds of finding shade, provided dehydration doesn't hit fast. The conditions required are stacked sky high. He'd have to locate one of the rare natural water sources in that bone-dry outback, like nighttime or a creek bed trickle, dodge full exposure to 35-degree heat, and keep movement minimal because of terror. Experts peg the absolute maximum survival window at 3 to 5 days with dew, but after more than 30 days the SAPL medical advice is blunt, very unlikely alive. These assessments only hold under the pure wandering scenario. They fall apart if a third party is involved, as criminologists quoted in Now to Love have suggested foul play, and Jubilin has flagged wildlife potentially moving it farther. Yet under straight wandering the last glimmer of hope is that a discarded hat or shirt would turn up if he was lost, confused, and dehydrated. None have. The expert timeline pins the Flinders update to October 27 with the 3 to 8 kilometer 3-day moisture boost. October 20 saw the Now to Love criminologist note short-term survival possible with natural shelter. But the scaleback confirmed the high risk. Every single one of these projections hinges on Gus wandering off alone, with the family fully cooperating. Before drawing any conclusions, all of the experts' assumptions would only be correct if Gus truly wandered off. But was Gus really lost? Is the wandering off theory done? As we pore over the mounting gaps in the evidence, the idea that Gus simply wandered off feels highly improbable, riddled with inconsistencies that demand we challenge the official narrative from the start. The timeline gaps hit hard right from the start of the search between September 28 and October 7, where the wandering theory falls apart in that narrow 30-minute window from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., with no confirmed footprints to back it up. The single child-sized shoe print found 500 meters from the homestead got ruled out because it didn't match Gus's boots. They swept a 6-kilometer radius, using 80 Australian Defence Force soldiers, State Emergency Service volunteers, infrared drones, and sniffer dogs across 470 square kilometers, but came up empty on any clothing or items like the blue Minions shirt, wide-brimmed hat, gray pants or brown boots, even though a confused or dehydrated 4-year-old would likely drop something along the way. We see it plainly. The outback's flat scrub bush should make tracks easy to spot. Yet there's nothing, and former homicide detective Jubilin called it a rid between the linies situation for foul play, since kids rarely wander far without leaving a trace. Expert criticism piled on around the October 11 update, with criminal specialists agreeing that somebody else had to be involved after the search scaled back on October 16, pointing out how the remote 43-kilometer track from the barrier highway makes long-distance wandering tough, without any evidence. A person like Gus typically freezes near home out of fear, not covering the 3 to 8 kilometers Flinders University suggested. Jubilin doubled down on a wildlife factor, potentially dragging it to farther, but stressed third-party intervention due to the lack of misadventure signs, hinting that police were quietly probing foul play. Another criminologist added that young kids seldom stray deep into the outback without discarding items, and the scale back only confirmed how weak the wandering theory stood. Online speculation kicked off around October 5 and muddied the evidence further, as keyboard detectives flooded Facebook and Reddit with unhelpful theories like abduction or family cover-ups. While police initially dismissed foul play, though fake AI-generated images of a wet backpack or Gus being kidnapped spread like wildfire, causing real harm and slowing down reliable tips. A family friend urged everyone to stop the cruel online theories because they were hurtful, but acknowledged how speculation ramped up after zero evidence turned up on the property. We noted that the 150 Crime Stoppers tips often pointed toward checking family dynamics or local involvement, even as SAPL stuck to their third-party evidence line. Horrifying theories surfaced from locals and media between October 1 and 10, with Junta residents suspecting wildlife or hidden spots like old mine shafts over pure wandering, especially since search volunteer Jason O'Connell stated there was zero evidence on the property despite thorough combing. Media flipped the script by saying the outback might have swallowed Gus, but the chances were low for straightforward wandering. Police seemed to accept the fate early, shifting to recovery because there was no proof of misadventure. Another report added that theories from keyboard detectives weren't helping, yet the search resumed on October 14 with ADF support precisely because doubts about wandering grew. Key facts compiling the denial up to October 28 show no third party at first, But Task Force Horizon now probes all scenarios after those tips, suggesting checks for human or wildlife intervention. The wandering idea doesn't fit because the remote setup makes abduction tricky, but also renders far-flung straying unlikely without traces. We flipped it if not lost. A third party makes more sense, with experts recommending expanded checks on hidden spots like homestead foundations or nearby farms. The overall timeline runs from the September 27 disappearance to the October 7 shift to missing persons, the October 16 scaleback, and the October 27 Flinders update amid rising criticism. One expert pushed back by suggesting searches closer to the homestead, inside and under the foundations, underground, basically, because so many cases end with missing people turning up buried in backyards. She drew from the Kristen Smart disappearance in May 1996, where she was never found initially, but biological traces surfaced buried beneath Ruben Flores' deck. The accused murderer's father, 25 years later using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. The remains got exhumed and hidden elsewhere, and radar plus dogs were spotted around the property, signaling a hunt for human remains. That was the third search of the house, first early on, second last year, but neither as extensive as the latest one. More recently, a New York man buried both his parents in their Albany backyard, and cadaver dogs were the key, picking up the scent before excavation uncovered the bodies. The point was that people rely too much on visual searches and think they're good at it. But we're not. We stare at screens all day, Netflix and movies, and miss subtle or hidden things in nature. Better to admit other animals excel at this, especially with smell over sight. She described a 10-year-old German shepherd named Z, certified as a cadaver dog by the North American Police Work Dog Association, trained to sniff out human remains, while ignoring animal smells or distractions, like dead animals or food. The dog alerts the handler on a hit, starting training with easy aids like placenta for blood and tissue. In one demo, Z alerted to an old hip bone not once, not twice, but 3 times in different spots. Covering this case for weeks, she hadn't seen a single photo of dogs in use, wondering if Australian investigators just aren't familiar with the tech. Flinders University experts on October 27 suggested Gus ventured well beyond the searched area, maybe 3 to 8 kilometers over 3 days, if he accessed moisture from dew or moist leaves, boosting survival past the basic 3 days without water, food, or shelter. Fear could limit his movement and shelter finding, keeping him closer if scared. Police clung to the wandering theory, but admitted unlikely survival, hoping for a discarded hat or minion's shirt if he was lost, confused, or dehydrated. Detectives haven't ruled out returning, with ongoing inquiries into various angles. From earlier, Jubilant suspected wildlife pulling farther, but read foul play between the lines for no misadventure signs. The criminologist flagged foul play, noting short-term survival possible with natural shelter, but the scaleback hammered the high risk. O'Connell as a volunteer saw zero evidence despite the effort. Medical experts advised little hope after the long stretch, triggering the scaled-back search while police kept making inquiries without details. A human physiology expert from Flinders offered an alarming theory that the search area wasn't big enough, urging expansion, because Gus could have gone farther than expected. Experts have told police that due to the harsh climate, he's unlikely to be found alive, with the search now firmly in recovery mode, though new theories point outside the zone. Others shared thoughts on the ongoing investigation, including possible locations, but specifics stayed thin. New theories surfaced exactly 1 month in about how far he might have gone, captured in exclusive video without direct quotes. Medical advice from early October reiterated little hope, scaling back while inquiries continued quietly. Where is Gus now? Over 30 days have passed since the disappearance, with Sepol shifting to recovery mode while sifting through 150 tips that at foul play, if Gus didn't wander off, whoever hit him had to act fast in that isolated outback spot. We're breaking down whether a vehicle could have carried him out of the area, and if not, how dogs might have missed him if he was stashed locally. This builds on the evidence of voids like no footprints or discarded items, making third parties more logical than wandering, as Jubilant urged checking human involvement back on October 8. Among the ways to take Gus away, a vehicle stands out as the most convenient means. Right in that tight 30-minute slot from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. On September 27, someone could have rolled up in a 4x4 or UTV, standard gear for the Outback, scooped him up without leaving a mark, The ADF searches from September 28 to October 7 scanned those dusty tracks, but turned up no unusual tire impressions, even though the flat scrub bush terrain should make them stand out. Gus was out there on the sand pile by the homestead, while his grandmother Shannon stepped inside to tend to 1-year-old Ronnie, opening that brief window for a vehicle to pull close without drawing eyes. The odds lean high for a quick getaway, using off-road wheels, drawing from local chatter and media buzz between October 1 and 10. A rig could slip onto the property, tucked 43 kilometers off the barrier highway, stuff Gus into a cab or covered bed, then head south toward Uintah, or even push 500 kilometers to Adelaide. Traffic sparse out there, perfect for blending in with a sheep hauling truck, though the risk came from those infrared drones picking up heat during nighttime sweeps. Family vehicles factor in here too. Jessica, his mom, and Josie, the grandfather, were out tending the herd 10 kilometers away, using their own ride, and their alibis hold if it was an inside job, since police confirmed they returned after the alert. But they cooperated fully, with no red flags raised on their end. Chances drop low for a stranger's wheels, or something tied to his dad Joshua. Based on alibi checks around October 5 to 11, Joshua was asleep in Bellelay North, a full 100 kilometers off. That's a 2-hour drive that doesn't squeeze into 30 minutes, and police woke him hours later, after which he drove over for a brief search before heading to Adelaide, with no suspicion on his vehicle. No reports came in of outsider rigs from Uintah locals, that tiny town of 60 folks, though Reddit threads on October 3 floated ideas of a local truck masking the move. But police shot down random abduction given the property's isolation, making it improbable for outsiders to strike unnoticed. Core details either undercut or bolster the vehicle angle from the October 13 to 16 searches. Task Force Horizon vetted those 150 tips, including any vehicle angles starting October 7, but nothing solid emerged. If a ride was involved, it dodged the ADF patrols and the resumed efforts with 80 troops on October 14. Flinders University experts on October 27 pegged Gus, covering to 8 kilometers under wandering assumptions, but we turn that to forced transport by wheels. If no vehicle, hiding on site makes more sense. Misinformation added layers from October 12 to 27, like that fake AI image shared 24,000 times showing delved into a car by an unfamiliar man 100 kilometers from Uintah, complete with a phony eyewitness caption. AF fact-check debunked it. And police called it distracting, wasting resources, though it fueled online talk of a car snatch. Even as officials held firm on no third party, we see echoes in other cases that mirror the vehicle and alibi puzzles here. Take Madeleine McCann, where vehicle theories fizzled without traces, but the last person to see her, Kate McCann, drew scrutiny over an alibi involving kitchen duties. Similar to Shannon prepping dinner while watching Ronnie, police dug into family ties. Much like the dynamics surfacing over the month in this situation, with the person last spotting the child often turning into a point of interest. As in Scott Peterson or O.J. Simpson setups. Kristen Smart's story offers another angle. No direct vehicle at first, but her remains got hidden then shifted later, exhumed and stashed elsewhere. So picture if Gus was shuttled out post-initial search, leaving radar or cadaver dogs to catch buried hints down the line. As those tools uncovered traces 25 years on in her deck burial. William Tyrrell parallels even closer, with early wildlife or vehicle ideas giving way to abduction despite no ride evidence, and family alibis vetted. Jubilin, who handled that, pushes reading between the lines for third party here, akin to Tyrrell's no traces after massive hunts. Diving deeper into those family alibis sheds light on vehicle potential. Shannon, as caregiver, saw Gus at 5 p.m. before heading in to handle Ronnie. She could have accessed a nearby station truck or UTV to whisk him into the scrub in 10 to 15 minutes, looping back under the guise of babysitting, with Ronnie as an internal alibi. Her story relies on personal account without outside witnesses, but the 470 square kilometer drone sweeps caught no odd vehicle signs. Jessica was out herding with Josie 10 kilometers off from 5 to 30 p.m., returning post-alert for the 3-hour family hunt. She might have swung back fast in their 4x4. 10 kilometers takes 10 to 15 minutes, grabbed Gus from Shannon, and headed out, though coordinating that keeps the alibi out there intact. The timeline fits if delayed return, but Josie as mutual witness strengthens it, and family rifts with Joshua could motive, yet no vehicle proof surfaced. Josie, transgender grandfather, mirrored Jessica's herding run 10 kilometers away, returning for the search, clashing with Joshua enough to push him out. Similar odds to Jessica. Sharing the herd vehicle to loop back and assist hiding, with their paired alibi holding firm. The rift amps speculation, but no tire evidence weakens it. Joshua's spot sleeps in Belleley North 100 kilometers distant, woken by police around 8 to 9 p.m. He drove in for a quick search then to Adelaide, too far for 30 minutes unless prepositioned, his vehicle unmentioned. That distant alibi checks easily with the police call, rift with Josie's possible drive. But timeline mismatches kill it. If a vehicle to whisk Gus away seems too risky, could they have kept him right inside the house? And if so, why hasn't he been found yet, even with sniffer dogs on the scene? The timeline for an internal hide starts tight, right after the disappearance in that 30-minute slot from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. on September 27. If Gus got stashed inside the homestead, someone had just enough time to tuck him into a locked room, basement, or storage space while Shannon stepped in to watch Ronnie and cook, building her alibi on those tasks. Though it's all self-reported without outside eyes confirming it. The early searches from September 28 to October 7 hit the property 3 times. But the focus stayed outdoors, turning up zero evidence in spots like Gus's room, Ronnie's room, or Jesse's room, leaving indoor areas less scrutinized. We spotted the second mound of sand near the homestead in the image analysis, positioned in the foreground to the left, looking fresher than the right-hand mound originally tied to Gus playing there. It raises questions about how long that pile had sat, and if we're sure which one he was on, hinting at recent digging within the home area, and who handled those holes overall. That ties into the discolored brown blob of sand close to the center in the foreground. A small patch of rich brown dirt. Why is it there? What purpose does it serve? And who dug it? Especially with maintenance work visible nearby. The second smallest structure on the property stands out, right near those sand mounds, equipped with a satellite dish, chimney, and various gear, showing clear signs of ongoing upkeep. It's the building most linked to the piles, so who lives in it, and where exactly are Ronnie's room, Gus's room, and Jess's room located? If hidden there, it could serve as a temporary hold, but the search volunteer noted zero evidence across the property despite thorough combing, and the father not being a fixer-upper for the station adds relevance to who managed that maintenance. Behind the homestead sits the round cement structure, shaped like a traditional circular reservoir. Was it in use? Did it hold water, and did they search it properly? If stashed inside or beneath it underground, it could act as a container or cover. Though the resumed search on October 14 with ADF forces found no signs, and the wooded area to the top right in the image shows no human or animal activity, no excavation marks, suggesting buried spots in the backyard might have slipped past. Power dynamics inside the house point to Shannon as the matriarch, the one who likely owns the station, wields the authority, and makes the calls. If anything happened to her, the whole family loses their home, Ronnie included. She was inside tending to Ronnie and cooking. But did she complete the meal and feed him before searching, or stop mid-prep? And where was Ronnie through all that? If an internal hide, her cooking alibi creates distraction, but the meal type matters. Evidence of it could show how long she stayed focused, with sandwiches taking far less time than a roast, affecting how continuously she got pulled away. Homestead sweeps happen 3 times but lack the depth of a full third-round probe in similar situations. The wooded area lacks excavation signs but calls for radar checks. And Task Force Horizon digs into all scenarios after those 150 tips, pushing to inspect hidden spots like foundations or local buildings. The remote Junta setup, with its 60 residents, makes strangers tough to pin, but family rifts like Joshua's clash with Josie heighten internal suspicion. We flip it if hidden inside. Dog limitations explain the miss, with the 3-hour family delay scattering scents on strong outback winds at 35 degrees, the dusty terrain disrupting scent pools, and tight enclosures like sealed basements or containers dodging detection. Sniffer dogs geared for live tracks early on before the October 16 recovery shift, and daytime hot sand masking heat, weakening scans overall. However, if Gus was hid inside the house, we need to examine why the sniffer dogs might have missed him despite their deployment. The delay kicked in immediately after the 5:30 p.m. mark on September 27, with the family searching for 3 hours before alerting police at 8:30 p.m., pushing dog deployment to the next day starting September 28. By then, scents could scatter on strong southwesterly outback winds, and the 35-degree heat sped up evaporation, weakening any trail. If tucked away in a sealed room or basement right away, the dogs arriving later wouldn't latch onto a strong signal, as they're most effective in the first 24 to 48 hours. Outback terrain and environment compounded the issue during the initial searches from September 28 to October 7. With dusty expanses and wide scrub bush disrupting scent pools from forming, gusts blew odors away fast, and if concealed underground in foundations or an airtight container, the smell got fully blocked, leaving sniffer or cadaver dogs without a hit. One expert pushed for checks inside and under the homestead, noting how buried backyards often hide cases. But the dogs paired with indigenous trackers found zero traces overall. Dog limitations showed in the live versus focus through the October 7 to 16 updates, where sniffer dogs hunted living scents early on, but if deceased or in a fridge-like sealed spot, only detect human remains. The switch to recovery mode on October 16 shifted emphasis. Yet trained dogs ignore distractions like animal carcasses or food, alerting solely to target odors. Without a robust scent from tight hiding, accuracy drops below 100%. As seen with a German Shepherd like Z hitting an old hip bone 3 times across spots in training using placenta for blood and tissue. Searches prioritized outdoors from the October 13 to 14 resumption, sweeping the property 3 times but zeroing in on bush and dams within a 5.5-kilometer radius, skimping on extensive indoor probes like foundations or rooms, if stashed in Gus's room, Ronnie's room, or needing a kitchen layout where Shannon cooked. Dogs might skip corners despite protocols, a volunteer noted zero evidence property-wide, but the emphasis stayed external, with wooded areas showing no activity or digs. Daytime environmental factors masked heat and scents in the October 20 to 27 Flinders updates. Hot sand at 35 degrees obscuring signatures for drones and dogs alike. Scents fading quick, if underground or in a backyard foundation. Dogs need potent whiffs, but the dry outback weakens them. Fear might freeze someone local, but tight concealment yields no trace, and harsh climate deems survival unlikely in recovery phase. The strange behaviors. The Lamont family's outright refusal to accept any help from volunteers or community search groups stands out as one of the most puzzling aspects of their response, with Josie Murray bluntly telling reporters, "You can't help," and emphasizing that they were handling it themselves, even as the vast outback terrain begged for more boots on the ground, a case where every extra eye could make a difference in spotting a small child. In typical missing persons scenarios, especially with young kids lost in remote areas, families rally every possible resource, pleading for public involvement to scar miles of scrubland, dotted with hidden dangers like mine shafts or animal burrows. But here the Lamonts drew a hard line, shutting down offers that could have expanded the search beyond official teams, fueling whispers that they were guarding the property to prevent accidental discoveries rather than maximizing chances of a safe return. This isolation extended to controlling access strictly to police and authorized personnel, locking out anyone else from the flat, open land that's notoriously hard to hide and yet yielded no traces, a move that flips the script on standard pleas for widespread community sweeps to rule out simple wandering mishaps. Adding to the oddity, the family delayed notifying Joshua Lamont, Gus's father, who only learned of the disappearance hours later when police showed up at his door, despite him living just a couple 100 kilometers away and being the biological dad with every right to jump in immediately. This lag sparked questions about intentional exclusion, as if keeping him out of the initial loop served to contain the narrative or avoid his input on family dynamics he had openly criticized. Josie, stepping up as the family spokesperson and described in media reports as a grandfather who transitioned to a woman years ago, turned down not just volunteer aid but also deeper media probes, offering only curt statements like, "We're still looking for him," without the impassioned calls for tips or shared details that grieving relatives often broadcast to drum up leads, a restraint that's at odds with the usual flood of public appeals in child vanishings where visibility can turn the tide. Shannon Murray, the grandmother who last saw Gus playing on a dirt mound at 5 p.m. on September 27, 2025, had her own history of getting lost on the very same property. A fact that raises eyebrows when paired with her decision to leave the 4-year-old unsupervised outside for about 30 minutes, while tending to his younger brother Ronnie indoors, in an isolated spot rife with risks like wild animals or sudden drops, behavior that deviates from the hyper-vigilant oversight most caregivers exercise in such unforgiving environments. Reports from locals and media digs reveal Shannon's past disorientation on the land, yet she opted for lax supervision that day, calling to fire 30 p.m., only to find him gone. a choice that seems reckless unless viewed through a lens of potential distraction or deliberate neglect masking something deeper. Joshua's brief involvement, rushing in with his tracking skills after the police alert, searching for a short stint, then heading off to Adelaide instead of hunkering down for the long haul, comes across as detached, especially since he'd voiced concerns about the kids' safety on the station beforehand. Living separately in a rundown farmhouse, far from the homestead due to ongoing clashes with Josie, as if his quick exit avoided prolonged exposure to the scene or family tensions that might unravel under scrutiny. Jessica Lamont, the mother, painted as introverted and rarely seen at Joshua's music gigs with his band The Cut Snakes, kept a low profile without the forceful public cries for help that often define parental desperation. Even though she was out tending sheep 10 kilometers away with Josie when Gus vanished, her subdued presence and lack of aggressive advocacy standing in stark contrast to the media storms families typically ignite to keep the spotlight on. The family's timeline on who was watching Gus shifted subtly over time. Initial accounts pinned it squarely on Shannon, but later murmurs suggested Josie's involvement, creating inconsistencies that erode trust in straightforward recollections. A red flag since honest reports tend to hold steady amid chaos. Topping it off, the Lamonts held back on sharing Gus's photo publicly in Oktoberfest 2025, days after the disappearance, and steered clear of airing internal strife like Joshua's belief that the kids weren't safe with Josie in that remote setup, a privacy wall that feels more like a barrier to scrutiny than protective shielding in a crisis, demanding transparency to rally support. Diving into the science behind these quirks, the blanket rejection of volunteers and tight reins on property access align with concealment behaviors outlined by search and rescue experts in online resources and criminology texts, where suspects in foul play scenarios clamp down on the scene to dodge evidence stumbles, as per FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit studies, showing that involved families shun external aid to preserve a controlled story, clashing with the stress-driven cooperation fueled by spikes in cortisol and adrenaline that push genuine victims to grasp at every lifeline. Family systems theory from psychology sheds light on the delayed alert to Joshua, framing it as manipulative isolation of unreliable members to bolster a cover-up, with Journal of Family Psychology research linking such info, holdbacks in crisis to hidden criminal motives, like shielding abuse secrets amid internal conflicts. Shannon's lax watch over Gus, despite her own prior disorientation on the land, ties into pediatric risk analysis from the American Academy of Pediatrics, flagging unsupervised play for a toddler in hazardous outback with shafts and wildlife as neglect or intentional risk, while spatial awareness science suggests her past lost episodes heightened her risk judgment flaws, potentially signaling desensitization from prior unreported incidents that a deeper probe might expose. Joshua's hasty departure fits Wooden's patterns in stress response models, a flight reaction amplified by pre-existing family rifts, syncing with cognitive dissonance theory where insiders dodge the site to ease guilt or evade detection, as APA studies on post-trauma behavior illustrate in cases where knowledge of wrongdoing prompts withdrawal. The evolving caregiver narrative, swapping between Shannon and hints of Josie, mirrors cognitive psychology on memory distortion, where consistent statements mark truth, but shifts scream deception, with deception detection lab data pegging timeline inconsistencies at over 70% correlation to event concealment, particularly in homicides where alibis crack under pressure. The absence of circling birds of prey, like wedge-tailed eagles or dingoes that would zero in on exposed remains per forensic entomology, points to hidden disposal indoors or buried, allowing a 1 to 2 week decomposition window in cool outback conditions to obscure causes like strangulation, as Journal of Forensic Sciences outlines in body recovery timelines. Finally, the tight lid on photos and statements resonates with social psychology's impression management theory, a strategy to evade scrutiny by curating info flow, akin to high-profile cases like Madeleine McCann where media limits sustain a preferred narrative over raw exposure. Josie Murray emerges as the prime suspect in swirling online theories from social media posts pegged as potentially the last to see Gus amid conflicting reports that muddle her role with Shannon's, her refusals to join searches, notify Joshua promptly, or welcome volunteers screaming control freak moves to hide tracks, especially given her history of clashes with Joshua who flat out said the boys weren't safe under her watch. Speculation runs wild that she offed Gus to bury evidence, stashing the body indoors for initial decay before relocating it, Her aversion to deep dives clear in shunning media and outsiders to keep personal skeletons and motives buried. Friends have pushed back against these cruel theories, pleading for them to stop as they torment the family, but the narrative persists in forums like Reddit, where users dissect her transition, formerly Robert, shifting post the death of Shannon's father Vincent, Pfiffer in a town that reportedly accepted it, and her marriage status with Shannon, suggesting layers of secrecy that fuel the cover-up angle. Her "we're dealing with this ourselves" stance, interpreted as dodging forensics that could crack the homestead open. Shannon Murray slots in as a secondary suspect, officially the last eyes on Gus per initial police logs, her own property wander-offs highlighting irresponsibility, and her gatekeeping of access bolstering the hideout hypothesis. Close polls suspect she knows it was just a wander, but won't own the neglect. Her interview dodges and timeline grips aimed at staving off probes that might unearth prior lapses or complicity in whatever befell Gus. Jessica Lamont falls as a lesser suspect, tied to the property with Josie and Shannon, her introverted nature and sparse public pleas linking her to the volunteer shutdown, hinting at complicity in the veil over marital strains with Joshua and long-standing family woes. She might fear exposure from intensified scrutiny. Joshua Lamont draws lighter suspicion, some theories tagging his early exit as skirting questions on the separations, but he's mostly cast as a cover-up victim for not getting the heads up. Though his nap during the incident and brief search stint stir inner circle doubts, if he harbors family dirt, his silence could be image preservation, affirming a reluctance for the case to burrow too deep into the rifts. Spot these shared quirks in how the search is wrapped up prematurely, ramping up doubts that it's not just kids wandering off but something darker like homicide pulling the strings. In the Lily and Jack setup, the RCMP threw everything at an 8.5 square kilometer grid right out of the gate in early May 2025, rotors chopping with helicopters overhead, drones buzzing low, and ground teams swelling to 160 volunteers combing the thick brush and steep banks around that rural Pictou County spot. But by May 7, just 5 days deep, they dialed it back hard, pinning it on slim survival chances in the terrain, even as no kid tracks or scraps showed up to back a simple misadventure. That pivot locked in forensics dives on the pink blanket shreds, one snagged in a tree a kilometer out, another stuffed in driveway trash, and deep dives into phone data and router logs, flipping the script from frantic rescue ops to piecing together a recovery puzzle where the bodies might never surface. It's that quick shutdown that screams they're not banking on live finds anymore, especially when standard protocol for presumed wanderers stretches searches into months, looping in endless tips and repeat sweeps to cover every ditch and thicket. The Gus parallel hits the same note, with Sapio calling time on the big push after only 10 days come October 7, 2025, across that endless flat outback expanse where you'd figure a 4-year-old couldn't vanish without a ripple, yet zero clothing, no hat, nothing to snag on the sparse scrub or get spotted by air crews. They handed it off to the missing persons unit for quieter drone footage breakdowns, all while the family waved off extra hands from volunteers who could have fanned out wider, echoing that odd reluctance to let outsiders poke around the homestead yard or beyond. Both operations cut the cord early, citing those brutal odds: cold snaps, no water sources, exposure eating away at tiny frames. But it bucks the norm for these rural kid vanishes, where cops grind on with seasonal restarts, if the wander theory holds water. Not folding tents so fast, unless the scent trail's gone cold, in a way that points to deliberate hiding or worse. We line them up like this, and the pattern whispers that without traces in checkable land, the focus slides from where'd they bolt to toward who staged this empty scene, treating the absences as endpoints rather than ongoing hunts. That early infusion of heavy-hitter investigators in the Lily and Jack probe seals the shift to crime mode thinking, starting sharp on May 3, 2025, when the Northeast Nova Major Crime Unit rolled in. Even as the file sat stamped missing persons under the Provinces Act, they framed it suspicious from jump, not your everyday lost in woods drill. Polygraphs rolled out by May 12 for the mother, stepfather, biological dad, and even the step-grandmother, probing truth on redacted angles like involvement or knowledge, while seizures grabbed phones and routers to sift for deleted pings or odd routes that didn't match the homebound timeline. Come September 2025, cadaver dogs shipped in from British Columbia, specialists like NARC and KIT scarred 40 kilometers of pipelines, trails, and that blanket drop site over 3 grueling days, sniffing for human decay, but turning up zilch, which only amps the forensics grind on 8060 video clips and over 860 public tips chasing leads like that unverified Haywood car sighting or neighbor vehicle noises overnight. Major crimes bread and butter is homicides and cold cases, not stray toddlers. So their day 3 hook in flags internal foul play hard, zeroing on timeline cracks. The sudden hush after the kids hit the kitchen and slid that back door open, or those blanket fragments planted far enough to mock a random wander, but close for a quick dump. Layer on Child Protective Services, yanking the stepfather's access to the baby sister right post-disappearance. And it's clear a parallel child welfare, threads weaving in, sniffing abuse or cover angles that tie straight to criminal probes, not just parental worry. For Gus, holding steady in missing persons unit territory past October 16, 2025, doesn't rule out a mirror escalation. If fresh intel cracks the no-wonder facade, the Sullivan blueprint shows how patterns snowball, where drone reviews or stalled tips could flip SAPOL into a major crime equivalent, especially with that October 27 expert breakdown from Nina Severston at Flinders University laying out how a scared kid might push 3 to 8 kilometers over days, guzzling dew-off leaves and hunkering in clothes against chills, yet defying the barren flatness that should have yielded prints or gear by now. Toss in the lone footprint dismissed as a dud 500 meters out, plus the family's 3-hour solo scour before dialing cops at dusk, and you've got tripwires for deeper scrutiny, much like the Sullivan door silence or blanket oddities that lit the fuse. Those home front frictions? Joshua getting the news hours late from police instead of kin, Josie batting away volunteer crews, track the Sullivan custody clashes and blocks, where Biodad claims clashed with mom's narratives, building motive stacks for why Granny's last insight might harbor secrets. If trackers logs or any polygraph push, though not public yet, throw mismatches on movements or alibis, SAPOL's poised to surge like RCMP's early pivot, pegging the Homestead Watcher as cover-up central, sifting for smothered timelines or shifted spots under that mound of dirt. We're eyeing the 1-month wall because it cinched with Sullivan's ramp before the cadaver sweeps and tip floods turned investigative gears criminal. Shifting our lens to how authorities clamp down on details in these baffling disappears, we see the RCMP in the Lily and Jack Sullivan probe doling out info in tiny bits, shaping what the public hears while slapping down wild guesses floating online. They stick to bare-bones timelines, like pinning the kid's last sighting to that May 1, 2025, Dollarama video with mom and stepdad, or noting the search kickoff on May 2 with alerts blasting by noon. Volunteer counts get a nod 160 strong by May 4, alongside pleas to ring the Northeast Nova Major Crime Unit hotline for any scrap of a tip. High-level ops updates trickle out. Polygraph outcomes surface vaguely, just confirming truthful hits for folks like Daniel Martell and Malaya Brooks Murray, without spilling the exact questions probed. Evidence nods come sparse too. Yeah, those pink blanket pieces in the tree and trash, or the boot print near the pipeline, but forensic results stay locked away. Periodic briefs label it suspicious under the Missing Persons Act. No more, no less. That drip feed tactic steers the story, like when new witness accounts on vehicle noises rumbling overnight, May 1-2 popped via court docs on October 17, 2025, after media hounding for more. Neighbors described a loud rig coming and going 3 or 4 times post-midnight, always in earshot, stopping distant then looping back, info that only emerged to counter rampant social media chatter and YouTube theories. The unverified Natasha Haywood, a key witness in the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan, sighting from May 30 gets similar treatment. Details on the tan sedan and older woman trickle out sans full context, just enough to tamp down abduction buzz without fueling alternatives. Video stats roll slow, 8060 files reviewed, or tip follow-ups, nudging the narrative to, we're still grinding, without handing over the playbook. Rumors get corrected selectively, debunking bio dad Cody Sullivan snatches since he passed his June 12 polygraph and hadn't seen the kids in years, or waving off wilder stuff like family cover-ups, but never diving into why inconsistencies like Brooks Murray's shifting wandering to abduction claims linger. Those slim updates on the Find Lily and Jack Sullivan Facebook page or RCMP site appeals, like the October 8 volunteer search turning up zilch, actually stir more speculation, keeping the pot boiling internationally as seen in recent Daily Mail and Mirror pieces from October 27 detailing mom's ongoing despair. We peg the reasons for this tight lid clear from RCMP's own playbook, safeguarding the probe's guts, so no leads or evidence get tainted before they're solid. Holding back forensic deets on blanket shreds or polygraph, nitty-gritty stops suspects from lawyering up or tweaking stories. Think Martel's phone and router grabs early on, or the redacted questions that might point fingers inward. It controls the crowd's take, pushing tips without letting harmful guesses derail things. As RCMP warns against social media sleuthing that could scare off witnesses. Legal boxes get ticked too, with releases timed through court hearings like that October 17 dump, balancing openness and hush, especially as the case hits 5 months with no charges, but a mid-November waterway search planned by volunteers focusing on a 3-mile radius. Maintaining fact focus over frenzy, per their statements, keeps the heat on real leads amid 10,000 plus search hours logged. Sepal echoes this in Gus Lamont's file, mirroring the drip with laser focus on search legs, like wrapping the initial 10-day blitz on October 7, 2025, or the October 14-17 refresh expanding 2.53 kilometers out. Explanations stick to ops medical pros weighing in on slim survival odds in the chill outback, deploying over 100 bodies with drones, trackers, and air support across 60,000 hectares. Renewed pushes get briefed without result spills, no word on that dud footprint 500 meters off or why birds of prey ain't circling. No foul play assurances drop alongside family cooperation nods, but zero chatter on other angles like why they hunted solo for 3 hours pre-call, or Josie's volunteer shutdown. Tip appeals via Crime Stopper hammer search rationale over suspicions, urging scraps without naming names. The October 17 rap statement spotlights phase end and info begs, dodging dives into individuals like Grandma Shannon Murray last eyeing Gus at 5 p.m. September 27 or tensions with Dad Joshua learning late from cops. We note Sepal sidesteps family phrase or theory rabbit holes, clinging to procedural facts. First photo drop October 1 channels eyes to tea and gray pants hunt, not whispers of abuse cover. Parallels RCMP's playbook, where limited releases like expert Nina Severston's October 27 take on Gus potentially trekking 3-8 kilometers via do sips and fear hunkers justify zone tweaks without broader fall play nods. This holds as the case lingers unsolved at the 1-month mark, with BBC and 7EW's recaps stressing ongoing probes sans suspect spotlights, much like Sullivan's slow burn international draw. Pivoting to how probes zero in on insiders in the Lily and Jack Sullivan investigation. The RCMP kicked off by zeroing in on the closest family circle, starting with stepfather Daniel Martel, who went public about taking a polygraph early on and passing it. Questions drilled down on if he'd killed the kids or played any part as an accessory. Martel even pushed for the test himself, coming out truthful, and he mentioned that folks on the mother's side got the same treatment to clear the air. We see how that scrutiny layered on the mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, nailed her May 12, 2025, polygraph with truthful hits on those blacked-out questions. Bio dad Cody Sullivan sailed through his on June 12, 2025, all answers checking out straight, but step-grandmother Janie Mackenzie hit a snag with hers on June 10, 2025, inconclusive thanks to some body response issues that threw off the readings. Once that inner ring got poked, the probe fanned out wide. RCMP grilled at least 54 people total, chased down over 80-60 tips from the public, sifted through 8060 video files for any glitch in the story, and ran forensics on stuff like those blanket scraps and a boot print up near the pipeline trail. That included looping back to extended kin, like sitting down with Cody Sullivan on May 20, 2025, to lock in his alibi that he was home that day, no contact with the kids in years. Tech side ramped up too, with family phones and routers under the microscope. Martel's gear first up to hunt for timeline slips or shady messages that didn't add up. Child Protective Services had eyes on the family by the May 2, 2025 vanish, flagging whatever red flags were there already. Then right after, by May 8, 2025, they barred Martel from seeing the little sister meadow, hinting at a deeper dive tying protection worries to possible crime vibes. Police clocked those family rifts from the start, tagging the whole thing suspicious by May 3, 2025, and roping in the major crime unit, the crew that tackles homicides, fueled by mismatches like the parents flipping from. They wandered off, to pinning it on the bio dad, plus oddball evidence drops like the blanket bit in a tree and trash a kilometer out, steering hard away from straight misadventure toward foul play angles. Those Sullivan family tensions ran deep. The split between Brooks Murray and Cody Sullivan left her with full custody, zero contact for 3 years, but Cody countered that he kept up child support payments all along. Then Brooks Murray bolted the area on May 6, 2025, cut Martel off on social media, and floated that Cody might have snatched the kids to New Brunswick, totally shot down when his story held. Paternal grandma Belinda Gray laid it out that Cody bailed after the breakup, and she'd talk about the kids in past tense sometimes, doubting they'd last in the woods. We line that up against Gus Lamont's setup, and the family strains echo loud. Sullivan's custody fights and comms blocks, like Brooks Murray icing Martell, track straight to Gus's dad Joshua Lamont bunking over beef with Grandma Josie, straight up saying he felt his boys weren't safe there. Dig deeper on those parallels. Sullivan's stalled or clashing stories, the mom's bio-dad blame game versus Cody's solid alibi, sync with Gus's late heads up to Joshua, who only heard hours later from cops, not kin, plus Josie's shutdown on volunteer search crews, stoking cover-up suspicions in both files. RCMP's heads up on Sullivan family mess, paired with those pre-vanished CPS drop-ins, primed them to spot crime potential fast, cranking up polygraphs and major crime by day 3. For the Lamonts, that Sullivan roadmap suggests similar heat if gaps widen, maybe polygraphs hitting grandmas Shannon Murray and Josie first, as last eyes on Gus, then phone sweeps and chats amid the drama. Suppo's missing persons unit grip could slip to criminal if drone clips or tips flag foul play, like that 3-hour family hunt lag before calling it in, or the volunteer no-go, mirroring Sullivan's inside walls. Court docs from August 2025 spilled more on RCMP's heavy lean on the mom and stepdad, polygraph takes included, floating no-crime vibe then but forensics grinding on to keep family in the crosshairs. Come October 2025, RCMP pushed tips through the Northeast Nova Major Crime Unit on October 8, after a volunteer sweep turned up zilch, sticking to family cooperation lines but leaving doors open for lead-driven expansions. Meanwhile, fresh witness bits dropped unverified, stirring online buzz, and Brooks Murray hit media 20 hours ago pleading amid claims of abduction. On Gus's end, Suppo wrapped the second search round by October 17 with no trace, but they're holding the line on probes, debunking fake sighting pics and weighing new experts 23 hours ago that Gus might have pushed beyond the zone. From Sullivan's family first polygraphs and gadget grabs, the net spread to outsider statements like the May 30, 2025, Haywood car spot or neighbor vehicle dribbles, mapping that inside-out push we could see play out in Gus if tips heat up. The next move. We track these forward-looking angles on the Gus probe, weighing if it'll stall out unsolved like those lingering kid cases where leads dry up without a body or break, or hit a dead-end conviction snag from shaky evidence chains. Expert Nina Severston out of Flinders University dropped her analysis on October 27, 2025, breaking down how a scared 4-year-old could realistically cover 3 to 8 kilometers over the initial 3 days post-vanish. Tapping dew from leaves for hydration and bundling up against night chills to stretch survival odds farther than cops first figured. That theory punches holes in the standard wander radius, pushing beyond the 6 Kira numbers and perimeter they locked in during those October sweeps, and she flags how fear might keep a kid hunkered low or looping back erratically, dodging the flat scrub that should have coughed up prints or scraps by now. We line this up against the no traces reality, zero hat, no shirt, nothing snagged on the endless nothing, and it hints at resumed ground down teens come spring when the outback thaws enough for deeper digs. Maybe air support scanning wider grids if weather cooperates. But Siverson doesn't sugarcoat that barren terrain eats evidence, scattering remains thin or burying them under windblown dust, slashing chances of spotting bones or gear even with cadaver crews, which tilts the whole file toward a drawn-out drag without quick closure, mirroring those patterns where remote vanishes fade into indefinite holds rather than snapping shut with arrests. Sopal's line holds steady on the ongoing push through the missing persons unit, with spokespeople stressing they're geared for future moves if fresh tips roll in or drone footage yields overlooked pixels from the homestead yard to the horizon. They keep it open-ended, no hard deadlines, but underscore zero foul play markers to date, which feeds our read on a slow pivot to long-haul recovery ops. Think archival forensics on footprints, or expert models like Severston's, not the high-octane hunts of week 1. This setup echoes the shelving rhythm we've clocked in stalled probes, where initial blitzes burn hot then cool to periodic checks if breakthroughs stall, leaving the core team sifting data dumps while field action hibernates. We see the risk baked in without a smoking gun like conflicting alibis or hidden spots under that dirt mound. It drifts into maintenance mode, annual appeals to jog memories, but no surge unless something cracks the family timeline wide. Online chatter from Reddit threads and Medium posts in October 2025 piles on the cold case vibes, with users dissecting how the remote setup and tight family grip throttle momentum. Folks point to those fake AI-generated sighting pics flooding feeds, warned by experts as distractions that splinter focus and tank tip quality. Public burnout sets in fast when searches wrap without visuals or wins, reducing inbound leads to trickles, and that amps the odds of the file gathering dust, despite inner circle suspicions like the 3-hour solo hunt or volunteer shutdowns. We parse these forums as barometers. Speculation swirls around cover angles without hard proof, but the echo chamber effect wanes as months tick, solidifying paths to unresolved stacks where charges never materialize, even as doubts linger on what went down in that yard. Drawing parallels to unsolved remote child patterns sharpens the outlook. Gus's file slots right into that vein, where forensics chew through grids but yield zilch on bodies or drops, leading to archived status post-grind if no physical hooks emerge. Those eerie matches hit on abrupt search cuts, followed by probes that simmer indefinitely, denying families any endpoint, just endless what-ifs looped in media recaps. We flag how Outback erasure plays king here, winds and critters scattering clues thin, tilting toward perpetual open without the closure punch of a find or bust. Media breakdowns from 7AWS and ABC in October 2025 capture month frenzy tapering sharply after the October 16 scaleback, projecting slim homicide ramps unless polygraph pushes on kin or Homestead recombs fire up over gaps like that pre-dusk delay. Otherwise, it bleeds into cold file territory, dotted with yearly pleas that keep names alive but rarely unearth new dirt, a trajectory we've seen lock in when evidence stays elusive. We watch for those trigger points. If family frictions boil over in statements or tips, it could echo escalations elsewhere. But the current missing persons lane forecasts steady updates over bursts, with conviction windows narrowing if foul play surfaces too late for timelines to stick. Escalation wildcards hover around accumulating intel on home dynamics, Joshua's off-site setup clashing with Josie, or the refusal of extra hands, potentially flipping scripts like in mirrored files, drawing major crime analogs if tips stack enough to force deeper dives. But no such units in play yet, so we bet on sustained missing persons cadence, periodic media nudges, and the inherent risk of no nail down if late confirms hit weak spots in chains of custody or alibis. True crime circles broaden this to the norm. These setups often brick wall at 1 to 2 month sans tangibles, shelving or flopping prosecutions on frail narratives, with Outback forensics pros noting how the land itself conspires against preservation, leaning files unresolved for the long haul. Trackers like Wikipedia keep it flagged active missing, sans resolution clocks, fueling bets it'll stretch years akin to other Outback enigmas, where family outreach fades and interest ebbs without fuel. We sift these as signals, pleas thinning out drags public pull, locking in fades without the jolt of a break, much like those hung convictions or pure shelves where probes linger but deliver zilch. Severston's model loops back in here, her distance estimates challenging initial bounds, but not guaranteeing spring hits. Drones might refly, but flat erasure odds stay low, prolonging the wait without payoff urgency. Sopol's tip open door invites hypotheticals. A drone glitch spotting anomaly or witness memory jog could spike, yet history shows remote isolation starves such sparks, edging toward indefinite holds over decisive turns. Social media dives deeper into fatigue factors, users citing how AI fakes, like those circulated post-search, erode trust. Mirroring broader warnings from digital forensics folks on how viral noise drowns legit leads, hastening cold drifts. Medium essays October round up the control elements, family reins limiting outsider eyes, potentially dooming deeper probes, paralleling unsolved arcs where internal clamps stall external pressure for answers. We connect dots to media's intensity drop. 7NW spotlights the scale back as pragmatic, but analysts whisper low homicide bets absent polygraph mandates or researches keyed on delays, forecasting annual cycles over breakthroughs. ABC angles on expert caveats, Severston's physiology breakdown underscoring kid resilience yet terrain tyranny, suggesting forensics evolutions like advanced modeling might extend life, but not resolve sans body hooks. Broader true crime pods and Bordict wall hit standard for evidence-barren stretches. 1 to 2 month marks birthing shelves or busts from timeline frailties, Outback experts hammering preservation pitfalls, scavengers, elements dissolving traces fast. This stacks risks for Gus mirroring those no-closure loops, probes indefinite but inert, families in limbo sans endpoints. Wikipedia's active tag belays speculation timelanes. Outback parallels hint multi-year silences, pleas waning as interest cools, no fresh narratives to reignite. Escalation hinges on dynamics tips, Joshua Josie strains or refusal echoes, if they mound shifts possible, but missing person stasis forecasts updates sparse, convictions elusive late game. Severston's October 27 input recurs in our scans, her 3/8 members projection fueling spring resumption talks. Weather windows for boots on ground wider than initial 600s fails, yet no traces flatness dims remains recovery, dragging without snaps. Sepal's future action nod ties to drone reparses, but foul play voids predict recovery slogs. Shelving echoes post initials if stalls persist. Online risks cold via location locks and controls, misinformation like AI picks fragmenting, fatigue cutting tips, suspicions inner but charges nil. Unsolved remote vibes seal shelve potentials post forensics. Abrupt ends to hunts with lingers endless, no family bows. Media's month 1 peak to post 16 fade eyes low escalates bar polygraphs, or recons on delays, cold files with appeals yearly otherwise. Factors like tension accumulations mirror flips, but no major now means person steady, late fells conviction risky. Discussions true crime wall norms 1-2 months no physicals, shelving week times, outback trace poor tilting unresolved. Trackers active no timelines, year speculation outback style. Please drop fueling declines. We hold these threads, patterns pointing shelve or snag like priors, probes open but odds low on shuts. As we wrap up our dive into the Gus Lamont case, the lessons hit hard on how these remote vanishes can slip into shadows, showing early signs of abandonment from both family and investigators. We've clocked the family's 3-hour solo search in the dark before calling Sepal, their outright refusal of volunteers who could have blanketed that flat outback faster, and the delayed heads up to Joshua Lamont, moves that scream control over chaos, not the frantic unity you'd expect when a kid's gone. Sepal scaled back after just 10 days, shifting to missing persons unit with drone reviews, but no major crime surge. Adds to the drift. It's like they're banking on low odds without pushing the family dynamics, or those inconsistencies like the irrelevant footprint, or no scavenger birds circling. This pattern whispers a file getting shelved prematurely, resources thinning as public heat cools, leaving suspicions of inner foul play hanging without teeth. Yet, we know probes like this don't always go dark outright. Sepal's open to tips and future actions. Forensics grinding quietly on footage or expert models from folks like Nina Severston, who stretches possible wander distances to 3/8 Conneberd. These under-the-radar steps could simmer, building cases without fanfare to avoid tipping hands or burning leads. The case might chug along in silence, polygraphs or rechecks on Grandma Shannon and Josie slipping through without headlines, much like how remote files evolve post-initial blitz. It demands patience from us viewers, holding out for that breakthrough tip or spring sweep. But we can't ignore the red flags. Does this quiet mode threaten Gus's safety further? If something darker's at play, like a staged scene where time erodes evidence or witnesses fade, is the family's grip shielding abuse traces, or just grief-fueled isolation? We're left questioning if abandonment's the real killer here, eroding chances for answers. What do you think, misadventure in the endless scrub, or hands closer to home pulling strings? Drop your takes below. In the meantime, we pray for little Gus Lamont, hoping wherever he is, peace finds him soon. Stay vigilant, folks. These cases remind us truth often hides in the waits.